Welcome back to your weekly roundup of everything that happened in Zenless Zone Zero, where we will cover everything that you missed inside and outside of the game. This week we're starting off with some drama. I'm just kidding though. It's not really drama, it's more of some bugs, which I suppose some people could interpret as drama, if the bugs are affecting someone's favorite character or a character that someone had spent a lot of money to get. The agent in question is none other than our brand new Soldier Anby. In fact, there were several issues that were identified by players on the Chinese server. These all affect how Anby plays. Specifically, it makes her a bit more difficult to use and thus leads to poorer performance, not just in terms of damage but also in terms of fun factor. Starting things off, the most damning bug is Anby's dodges during her basic attack string. Specifically the 4th attack, which is the dashes back and forth, and the 5th attack, which is when she jumps into the air and spins. Essentially, it was initially seen that you could not dodge during either of these two attacks. So even if you pressed the dodge button at the correct time, you would stay locked into the attack and thus end up getting hit, knocking Anby down and interrupting the attack. Now, on one hand, you could argue that this might be realistic, since, I'd like to see you do a sudden mid-air dash while you're spinning around. Or you could even also argue that maybe everyone is too used to Miyabi, where you have 2 auto parries in her basic attack and like a bajillion iframes as she dashes through the enemy to also dodge attacks. But compare this with Anby now to, say, someone like Evelyn, who is also able to get hit during some of her basic attacks, like her held attack or the one where she jumps into the air and pulls herself towards the enemy. Evelyn can get hit, but at least she has super armor, so she still takes damage, but she doesn't get interrupted. Now, it was later discovered that you can actually dodge out of Soldier Anby's attacks, but it's very finicky. For the 4th basic attack, Anby actually only dashes through the enemy once. But if you mash the attack button, then she will do a follow-up of 3 extra dashes, and then she does her 5th attack. So if you want to dash out of her 4th basic attack, you have to not mash the attack button so that you don't commit to the extra dashes, which I feel like is pretty hard to do, to ask somebody not to mash the attack button. But then otherwise, if you want to dodge out of the 5th attack, you also cannot mash the attack button, but you need to press the dodge button as she is finishing her spin attack and coming down to the floor. Another issue raised is with regards to her EX special and ultimate, which I myself also noticed a bit. When you use these attacks, it's possible for some of the hits to quote-unquote miss the enemy, which means that you don't get the full stacks of White Thunder on the enemy, even though the skill description says that when it hits an enemy, they get full stacks. This is most apparent if you've used Soldier Anby to fight against multiple enemies that aren't really grouped up together. The main enemy that is targeted takes the full hit and gets maximum stacks, but the other enemies on the outer edges of the attack may only get 1 or 2 stacks, since they aren't getting hit by the full EX special. This can be even better visualized if you use Anby in the top-down event of March on Tiny Titan, where you see just how wide the attack is. But speaking of her ultimate, another major issue is that she can get hit out of her own ultimate. And this isn't an Evelyn scenario where there was intentionally less iframes. She just can straight up get hit during her ultimate, which should be where you are invulnerable. There are also some minor gaps in the iframes when you do the classic EX special into 3 regular special attacks to trigger the 3 White Thunder marks, meaning that she too can get hit during this little combo. And then, yeah, there's a lot. The targeting on her 3rd basic attack, where she hops back and then throws her swords, is also a bit wonky, where instead of dashing to the enemy after this, she ends up just attacking in place. And last but not least, her dodge sometimes doesn't work, where even if you correctly dodge through an attack, it doesn't activate the evasive window where you can then follow up with a counter. Now, aside from Anby getting hit during her attacks, which obviously sucks a lot, you'll have heard a lot of the issues are revolving around her dodges. This is actually really bad, because Anby's dodge counter is a big source of her damage. The multiplier on her dodge counter is higher than any of the hits from her basic attack string, and it also fills up the marks on the enemy much faster. All this being said though, the dev team is aware of some of these issues, specifically the timing issue during the basic attacks and also the special attack following the dodge. These issues will be fixed in an update later this week, so if you open the game one day and see that you download a couple of megabytes before being able to log in, know that this is what it is for. And also, we should be getting some polychromes as compensation for the bugs. There's not confirmation yet about whether or not they have acknowledged some of the other stuff, such as the targeting issues or the ultimate iframes, but time will tell to see if that gets addressed. Maybe it's better that they're doing it one by one though, since it means if or when they address the other issues, we'll get another round of polychromes later on. Now then, with that out of the way, let's talk about some happier stuff, shall we? The first is that next week, the Trigger and Zhu Yuans banner will be releasing on April 2nd. So as usual, this is your friendly reminder to start pre-farming if you haven't already. To get Trigger to level 60 and core skill F, you'll need 300 purple XP logs and 60 of the new expert challenge drops, as well as 9 dead end butcher notorious hunt drops. And if you haven't gotten a good set of discs for her yet, good news! Starting on Wednesday the 26th, we will have a double drop event for routine cleanup, running all the way until next Monday the 31st. And in the meantime, you might want to keep an eye out for trigger guides being uploaded in the near future. Who knows, maybe you should subscribe to my channel in case I upload one too. Nudge nudge, wink wink. But otherwise, Friday is also going to be our regular Shiyu defense reset, and this time the buff will be that enemies will have their stun damage multiplier increased by 30, and when an aftershock hits an enemy, their fire and electric resistance will be reduced by 20%. Clearly trying to promote our new stunner Trigger, as well as Soldier Anby and her aftershocks. And I guess Evelyn too to an extent. Moving over onto social media events though, this week was a quiet one. There is another Twitter event underway though, and it's to help out Pulchra adapt to the Sons of Caledon, specifically to Bernice's very loud personality, let's put it like that. By following the official Twitter account and posting a comment about how Pulchra can deal with Bernice, by the 27th of March, you could win 100 polychromes. And then the one other social media post is related to Soldier 11's birthday, which was this past Friday on the 21st of March. So of course, what better way to celebrate than getting some super spicy noodles over at Chop's shop. And lastly, for the speculation zone, we have some talks about potential 1.7 reruns to go alongside Vivian and Hugo's banners. As usual, it feels like miHoYo are probably going to try and pair the rerun agents with someone who would work alongside the regular featured agents. For example, Astra had an attacker alongside her with Ellen, and then Evelyn had a stunner alongside her with Qingyi. Soldier Anby had an off-field DPS in the form of Bernice, which I suppose is like the next best thing in terms of a quote-unquote aftershock agent. Even though Bernice isn't actually an aftershock attacker, it's more of just somebody else that can do damage while off-field. And then of course, alongside Trigger, we are getting a damage dealer in the form of Xuyen. So, firstly, Vivian, as an off-field anomaly agent, kinda like Bernice, would have a perfect pair for her in the form of another on-field anomaly agent. Someone like, say, Jane or maybe Yanagi. Meanwhile, for Hugo, as an ice attacker, he would want either some form of support or stunner. Of course, Lycan absolutely fits the bill a lot here as an ice stunner, and also in terms of lore, but for limited agents, that likely leaves Lighter, who is also a stunner and can buff ice, or Caesar, who's just a generally good support. But out of those four, I think that the signs are definitely pointing towards Jane as a rerun alongside Vivian, and Lighter as a rerun alongside Hugo. Jane is, I feel like, almost guaranteed, considering not only does pairing anomalies work together really well, after Xuyen, Jane would now be the oldest limited agent that hasn't gotten a rerun yet, but then there is also Jane's new kit that you can use in the Lost Void mode. So this can act as a sort of teaser to say, hey, look at how fun this trial Jane is with all of these fancy new skills. Aren't you having fun? Don't you want to pull for her now? Well, guess what? Now you can. And then as for Lighter, he's a little bit harder to argue for his guaranteedness, but in this patch we have been given a trial version of Lighter several times. Again, maybe trying to tempt you into seeing how fun he is and what you're missing out on. Now, the same could be said about Caesar, who is given as a trial agent in the top-down version of Tiny Titan, but arguably that's not as convincing since it's not really like regular combat, that little top-down event. Plus, I mean, come on. I highly doubt that miHoYo are going to pass up on the opportunity to let people make their dream husbando team of Lycan, Hugo, and then Lighter. But of course, this is simply speculation, and we'll have to wait for the 1.7 reveal stream to find out for sure who will be rerunning and whether or not our polychromes will be safe. Otherwise, as always, thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, liking, commenting, and subscribing is greatly appreciated. And so, until next time, I hope you all have a good week ahead, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!